International Affairs Columnist Jonathan Manthorpe, my guest. He's been in this business for almost 30 years.
Oh,
something
well,
like
let's
that.
Let's say 30.
30-something.
30
and you've been a special advisor to Trudeau, I remember that, in London and the Globe and Mail and the Toronto Star, and you've been posted in Africa, and you've been posted in China and in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Where haven't you gone?
Well, lots of places to go yet. I'm really interested in Latin America at the minute.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I bet you are.
Yeah.
So, the headline read something like, the Brits should take advice from the Chinese in this Murdoch thing. Tell me what that's about.
Well, Murdoch moved into Hong Kong in, I guess, the 1980s. He bought the South China Morning Post and then decided he wanted to get into TV. He saw China as the great TV market, 1.3 billion people. It mesmerizes everybody and they go stupid. So he bought a Hong Kong operation called Star TV from the son of Li Ka-shing, Richard Lee, who is a good Canadian boy as well. Bought it for way too much money and only discovered afterwards that actually, even though it broadcast into China, nobody in China paid for it because it was all pirated. So he then started trying, well, he made a very unfortunate speech at the time that he bought it, where he said that totalitarian regimes could not survive satellite television. So immediately, the Chinese president of the time, Jiang Zemin, ordered all satellite dishes in China removed. And
and he can do that.
And he could do that. So Murdoch was sitting there, having paid through the nose for this Star TV, with no audience in China, and they weren't paying anyway. So he then sort of changed his tune. I mean, just turned on a dime. It was quite extraordinary. He cut the BBC out of the Star TV index. He published a book by HarperCollins, which was another part of his empire. Published
on
a book.
patent.
Well, no, wait a minute. First, he published a book by the Paramount leader's daughter, about the Paramount leader, about Deng Xiaoping by his daughter, which was a hagiography. And then he canned Chris Patton's book on his time as governor of Hong Kong, because he thought China wouldn't like it. He cozied up to all sorts of people in the propaganda department and got a little way into China, but really not very far. And every time he tried to make a significant inroad, they stopped him. But they also were very clever because they milked him for all modern TV technology. He trained a lot of people for the national television service, and so they just stole all his technology, paid nothing for it.
And where did Wendy, Dung Wendy Murdoch, Wendy Dung Murdoch, his wife, fit into all of this?
Well, she was. She has a tabloid story which we won't go into now. Suffice to say that in 1999, I think it was, she had been working as a producer for his Star TV or Star Phoenix TV in Hong Kong. She managed to meet him acting as a translator for him in Shanghai on some deal he was trying to do, and it was instant recognition, and within a matter of months he'd dumped his previous wife and had married Wendy, and of course there was a lot of suspicion at the time that she was a plant by the Beijing government. I don't think that's true, but he certainly saw her as somebody who could lever him into China. Didn't work.
Really?
Didn't work.
And what good fodder for News of the World.
Oh,
if that had happened.
If the News of the World had been onto that story.
But did she have anything to do with his business dealings in China?
Yes, she did. Yes, she did.
So she was the link, perhaps, or not?
Yeah, well, it didn't work out that way. I think he hoped that she would be, but she didn't get any further than he had without her. And they spent a lot of money in China. They spent huge amounts on .coms, which they didn't get anything. I reckon that over the 20 years, he spent about $2 billion in China and lost about $1 billion of it.
Really?
Yeah.
And because that MySpace, was it MySpace in
That's
China?
right.
That didn't work out. He unloaded that for 35 million. And I guess if you're Rupert Murdoch unloading or taking a bath for 35 million.
Well, he paid 545 for it.
Right.
And he sold it, just a couple of weeks ago for 35.
He paid 545
Yeah.
and sold it for 35.
Yeah.
That's not good math.
That doesn't
That's
work
not
out.
good business.
It's not.
Is it unusual for him to have deals that go sideways?
Well,
for
all his
Murdoch?
deals on China have gone sideways. Every
All
single
of the
one.
China deals.
All of them.
Why China? Just because the Chinese said, you know, we want to pick your brain, but we're not buying your product, or what?
Chinese don't want anybody from outside in their markets unless they're under their control. And particularly the media. They are so sensitive about the media and about what Chinese people get to hear and see. They are never, never, never going to let an outsider like Murdoch have significant control of media there.
Yes. As you watched the MPs interrogate Rupert Murdoch, his son James, and Rebecca Brooks, what did you think?
Well, I think it was a pretty poor show in a lot of ways, and I guess it was partly constrained because there's probably all sorts of legal cases in the offing. But I don't think that the British MPs were particularly well prepared. I don't think the questioning was particularly well informed or tough. You know, imagine if it had been a congressional hearing in the US. I mean, there would have been a lot of sweat on the floor, I would think, wouldn't you?
I would think. And I thought, you know, he was vague purposely vague, wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
If you could get away with it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think what happens now is going to be interesting. We may be seeing not necessarily the end of News International, but the end of the sort of Murdochs running it. I would expect that there will be a fair shareholder revolt over this.
Right. And what does it mean to the Daily Mirror and
well, the other ones, the other
other
papers,
tabloids?
Well, I think they're probably relishing in this, but of course there are now more and more stories that they were doing the same sort of thing. Now, David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, has ordered a couple of inquiries into the media and how the media operates in Britain. That's always something which makes journalists a little nervous. We'll have to see what happens. But of course, he has been touched by this pretty badly as well, because he was friends with Rebecca Brooks. They rode together. They were part of a sort of horsey set in Oxfordshire and rode together at the weekends. So he's been tainted by this as well. But of course, whole generations of British politicians have cozied up to Murdoch. I think quite foolishly. I think the idea that Murdoch could make or break a British government is actually not true.
Not true. So it won't bring down David Cameron.
I don't think so.
Prime Minister Cameron did say it was a mistake to hire News of the World.
Yeah. No, I think that this whole notion that that Murdoch was running politics is quite wrong. What he was running was papers which listened and fed on the views of the middle of British society, which is what all editors of metropolitan newspapers try to do. And so when his papers switched from Maggie Thatcher to Tony Blair, he was following what British voters were doing. And again, when he abandoned New Labour and turned more to Cameron, this was what British voters were doing.
Well, I think you remember that Ellen Fotheringham many years ago wrote a book called Birds of a Feather, which was about us and them, or the journalist and the politician, and that they actually do go to 24 Sussex and share a few champagnes. And there's some very cozy relationships.
Absolutely.
And sources and things like that.
Well, and as we know, Alan Fotheringham wrote his best stuff about Ottawa when he never got any closer than Smith Falls. And as soon as he went to Ottawa, his stuff was not as good, in my view.
Well, who, what, where, when, and why, and all of that. One last question. I'm going to India, to Mumbai, in the bombings in the Opera District. What do you make of that?
Well, of course, the big fear when it happened was that this would be another terrorist attack which had roots in Pakistan, and that the tender negotiations towards a peace link between the two after the last Mumbai attack in November 2008, which killed relations for 2 years, that this would again put things back in the deep freeze. So far, there has been no significant evidence of a link to Pakistan. It looks like a domestic operation, almost exclusively, a group called the Indian Mujahideen, which is a radical Islamic group, but which is responsible for many bombings in Mumbai over the years. And I think also both the New Delhi and Islamabad governments are keen to not have their some nascent relationship knocked off the rails. So I think there will be a lot of effort to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand.
Yes. Stephen Hume wrote an interesting column on the weekend that Canada was a soft target and that we shouldn't be so uppity about they won't go after us, the terrorists. He feels they will. A friend of mine who's a terrorist expert said not so, because they really want to blow something up like Mumbai or kill people in New York, and the soft targets like us.
Well, I still don't think that we should be too confident that we're not a target. You know, there's been evidence of local homegrown would-be jihadis going and training in Pakistan. You know, we've got this long record of involvement now in Afghanistan, which seems to be one of the things that the would-be terrorists tick off as marking you for attack.
Sure, we did manage to stay out of Iraq.
We stayed out of Iraq, which was a blessing. But so, you know, we shouldn't get complacent. We shouldn't. But we're probably, not top of the list. But we should not just think that we're safe. Totally, we're not.
Right. A pleasure to see you again.
And you.
Thank you, Jonathan Manthorpe, International Affairs Columnist for the Vancouver Sun newspaper.